So this is the Korean War, and we begin with phase one. It started from 27th of June all the way up until 15th of September 1950. So on the first day, you get 135,000 North Korean forces that crossed the border into South Korea. So they began their invasion, and South Korea had 98,000 forces at the border. And literally just 2 days later, um, they caught them by surprise and captured the city, the capital city of Seoul. And on July 1st, the US forces arrived and they helped slow down the North Korean forces. But they were all caught by surprise since they got pushed all the way down to the Busan perimeter. And you can see on the map here how far they pushed. So they took Seoul, Icheon, Osan, all the way up until it Busan perimeter. And then in the ninth, so some background is the 1950s caused for the new fear of communist spread through Stalin. And at the time, Korea was split between communist North and South Korea, which was backed by the US. And right before the war started, uh, the Russians and the American forces had pulled back. Russians left in 48, and the Americans left in 49. So, Communist China didn't recognize South Korea as land protected to the US. So, the North Korean forces moved quick by taking everyone by surprise because they had tanks, and the South Korean army did not have tanks. So the US saw this as a dangerous situation since it would damage their image as protectors of the world, and the Truman administration was not going to risk losing the trust of other countries that counted on the US for protection. And when the North Koreans attacked, the US sent a small, uh, like a couple hundred people to support the South Koreans, but they were not prepared, and they had to use time-saving strategies until the reinforcements arrived. So the tank on the top left is a T-34 tank. It's a Soviet tank, and it's what the North Koreans used. Um, it was a tank with very heavy armor. So the South Koreans and the Americans were at first afraid of this tank since they didn't have the South Koreans didn't have tanks. So this is literally just like a very heavy armored vehicle. And even after some reinforcement came with the M26, um, this American tank, I mean, not the M26, the M4A3E8, the one on the top right, uh, this tank was not enough to destroy the T-34 tanks. So, the shots really just blast off. So they had to hold off until later on the M26 tanks came and they were able to destroy the T-34 tanks, and the US and the South Koreans were no longer afraid of the T-34. And then phase two began on September 16th through the November 2nd of 1950. The US Army began their offensive out of the Pusan perimeter, and on the 20th of September, they crossed the Han River, and then the 27th, Seoul was recaptured by US and South Korean forces. And the 1st of October, the Republic of Korea crossed the 30th parallel, and the 9th of October, US and South Korean forces began their attack in Pyongyang, which is the capital city in North Korea, and South Korean forces captured the port city of Wonsan. And the 19th of October, they ended up capturing Pyongyang, and then they were caught by surprise because the Chinese were there. So the Communist Chinese began their offensive, and the 29th of October, the U.S. landed in Iwan. So General MacArthur believed that the only way to repel North Korean forces was through amphibious means. And once the South Korean and U.S. forces moved out of the Pusan perimeter, the UN had approved for the peacekeeping to go beyond the border of the 30th parallel. So they ended up pushing, if you look at the map, the 30th parallel here, they ended up pushing all the way up through this line, and they continued all the way up until the river, which was the border for China. And soldiers ended up discovering that there were Chinese soldiers fighting, but they had no idea how many or how deep they were in. So eventually, they end up getting pushed all the way back until the 30th. And a quote is, I can almost hear the ticking of the second hand of destiny. We must act now or we will die. We shall land at Ichon and I shall crush him. General MacArthur. So on the map, you can see Ichon here. This was a very, very uh, important battle because in order to get out of the Pusan perimeter, which was the only land that the U.S. and South Korean forces had at the time, they ended up launching two attacks. So they attacked from here, and then they attacked from here, and then they pushed, the North Koreans out of there. And it was very important in deciding uh, whether the U.S. would keep their influence in Korea or not. And we can see here another map of their offense.